So I made a video earlier about threading, and I still feel pretty good. So I figured that I might as well make a second video, and I won't publish it today though. I'll publish it tomorrow. Well, when this is published and you're looking at it, it'll now be today. That's the weird thing about time and recording and so on and so forth. Anyway, I want to talk about my experiences as a musician, which was a very big part of my life as a teenager. It was basically the dominant thing that I cared about from ages about 15-ish, 14 to 20. I was very much in love with music. Well, okay, so we gotta tease this apart a little bit. I wouldn't describe myself as a musician per se, so I'm a writer. Most of all, my home is writing text, right? And now I'm making videos, but I still don't know if I would describe myself as a video guy. Again, I'm basically talking at the screen, right? So what I'm doing is I'm writing in my head, and then I'm speaking words out as if I'm writing them, and I'm not really making full use of my what I could be doing with the video format. And I'm moderately curious to do more with videos and to figure out editing and to figure out there's a whole language there with cuts and angles and multiple shots and music and all those things. But the main thing that I'm interested in is really the quality of thoughts at the most kind of fundamental level as I see it. And so even with music, I appreciate good melodies, I appreciate good arrangement, I appreciate good lyrics, and sometimes a chord change hits the spot and you're like, ooh, that's good, but when I encounter real, what I define as real musicians, like people who live and breathe music the way I live and breathe words, then I realized that, oh, that's not me. I don't wake up in the morning wanting to practice the guitar, right? And there are people who do that. There are people who freaking, they go to sleep with their instrument, they wake up with their instrument, they're just always playing. I try to play more. I noodle around. It's relaxing for me. It's fun. But, it's like a person who plays sports with his friends from time to time versus a person who freaking wakes up at 5 a.m. to practice hoops because he wants to be perfect, right? And I could see myself. There was a phase in my life where I was obsessive about writing that way, and I kind of tapered off a bit. So I'm a bit of a multidisciplinarian, multimedia, try a little bit of everything kind of guy with a foundation in writing. But I was very much involved in the social aspect of music. I think that's another part of me that I focus on. Which is to say, I went to a show, right? A gig. A friend brought me there, and I had a really good time. This was the first music gig that really kind of shook me up. Was where was this? It was after the tsunami, the Indonesian, the Southeast Asia, the kind of the 2006 tsunami, 2005 tsunami, right? So there was a gig called Sound Relief. It was at Zouk in Singapore, and there were a bunch of bands playing to raise money for tsunami relief. And one of the bands that played was Ronin, there were a few. I remember some of the other bands. A Vacant Affair was playing, I think. Is it? I think so. I mean, none of you would probably know these bands, but I'm curious to see what I remember. Ugly in the Morning was playing. There were a few other bands like that, and I was especially struck by Ronin because they had this conviction, this confidence, this stage presence. I became friends with all of them. I was, I wanted to be them, right? I wanted to do what they were doing. I saw that they were creating an experience on stage. They were having a good time themselves, and they were involving the audience in that experience. And the audience in Singapore, the music audience, I would say, is mostly kind of slightly skeptical and slightly, they're not hostile, but in the context of music, you could say that they're kind of hostile. They're just, they're kind of stiff. It's a stiff audience that's almost afraid to have too much fun, right? Like that's the general vibe in Singapore, or it used to be. I think it's getting better. And I saw that, I wanted to do it. There were a few guys in my school, in my secondary school, who would play the guitar, and they were metalheads. They used to play metal, and they would have acoustic guitars in that they would bring to school with them, and like they would be studying for their exams after school, and then they would be playing guitar in between breaks, during breaks. And I wanted very much to be a part of that scene. So I was on a forum, and there were like a local. It was a social board of a local gaming. No, there's a gaming forum. So Game FAQs, right? GameFAQs.com is a game forum, and on that game, there's a massive set of forums, right? And then there's like the Singaporean social board for people who use Game FAQs. And so that's SGSB, and then SGSB, Singapore Gamers Social Board. There was like an offshoot that wasn't based on Game FAQs, so I think we called it SGSB2, right? And then I had friends there. I hung out there. I spent a lot of time there. I wonder what happened to everybody. I think we just kind of slowly, like Facebook came around and all those. This is like before Facebook, right? And a couple of my friends wanted to start a band. I wanted to play with them, but I had like no, I could barely play the guitar, and there was one very good guitarist and one very good drummer, and so I wanted to play the bass, and I kind of, so they were both good musicians, but I don't think either of them, well, it's been 10 years, I don't know if they will agree or disagree with me saying this, but I don't think they had as much of a band kind of publicity mindset, performer mindset. Like they were musicians. They were the guys who play very well, but they weren't performers. And I think I always wanted to be a performer, and it didn't matter to me how good my musician skills were. Like good enough is good enough for me. Like I didn't need to be a great musician. Like I did study and observe and venerate great musicians, but I wasn't hung up on. I didn't feel like I have to be a really good musician before I can perform, because I do believe that you can have a good performance with average music that's moving and wholesome anyway. And I cared a lot about vibes and connecting with the audience and talking to the audience and telling them how I felt and how my bandmates felt and stuff. Back then, I was very kind of aggressive, belligerent, ignorant, naive. And I tried to, insist on what the band name should be, and unbeknownst to me, the rest of them kind of correctly agreed that I shouldn't be in the band, and that I was, kind of causing a mess, which they were right about. And so they had me leave the band, which was, well, I guess it's very interesting how band decisions are made. I think what they did was, and I wasn't a very good player anyway, right? So they were right on many fronts to not want me in the band, and I guess they just chose another player, right? And that was that. And I was pretty torn up about it. I was pretty, I don't want to say that I was betrayed. I don't think that's correct, but it felt that way. If that makes sense. Like I felt it was I was disillusioned, right? I had the illusion of everything's going great in my head, right? But that feeling wasn't grounded in reality. My relationship with those people who I still care about and I still love in a sense, right? But like I was not basing my feelings on any grounding in reality. I wasn't communicating with them. I was assuming how they felt, and I assumed that they felt the way I felt. And that was one of the early experiences that kind of made me wake up to the nature of social reality. And like it hurt so bad to be so wrong about other people that I wanted to get right about other people. I wanted to understand people, and that was one of many incidents that. So that was in the musical sphere, right? I started another band. We were doing pretty alright. We were having a good time, and eventually this band didn't work out either. I introduced them to my previous band. I don't really want to go into details of that. It wasn't a big deal. The band never really went very far. Although we did, if I remember correctly, I think we did once go to a bar and play an open mic, which was like, like my previous band hadn't done that, even though they were better. I don't know. It's all strange memories, and I'm getting a little bit self-conscious talking about it because I don't know if those guys are going to see this and contradict my narrative in some ways that I could be wrong. I could be misremembering some of this stuff. I could be getting things wrong. I'm sure they played some gigs, right? But anyway, second band didn't work out either. And the third band was the charm for me. So one guy was just my schoolmate. One guy was a friend of a friend. And we called ourselves Armchair Critic. And we played dozens and dozens of shows. I think we may have played over 100 shows. You got to check there used to be a list of gigs on MySpace, but I'm not even sure if we listed all of the gigs that we played. We played at least like 60 or 70 shows. I feel like it might have crossed 100, and that was a fantastic experience for me. I would say my time in Armchair Critic was my education. I learned more playing in the band and playing gigs, organizing gigs, interacting with promoters, interacting with venues, interacting with fans, or people who show up to gigs, supporters, scene kids, selling tickets, doing promotion, setting up the MySpace page, talking to people. I learned more of writing songs, managing internal conflicts. I feel like I learned more from that experience than I learned at school, like in terms of skills that I use every day, right? Like I still have kind of a musical approach to Twitter, to YouTube, right? I think of myself as a performer, I guess, as an entertainer, right? And as a very inclusive entertainer. I don't want to be like on a pedestal that people worship from far away. I want to be like a folk singer, right? I want to lead the audience in a sing along, right? That's my jam. That's the stuff that I live for and I enjoy. Eventually, Armchair Critic kind of it was so in Singapore, guys have to serve national service, which is either most of us serve in the military, some people serve in police, some people serve in the civil defense, which is like firefighters and rescue and stuff like that. But so me and Ahmad Ryan, me and the guitarist, we both repeated a year in junior college because our grades weren't good, and our drummer did well enough to not have to repeat. And so he finished his junior college years a year before us, or rather, me and Ahmad finished a year late. And then so he had to kind of scale down his and our drummer couldn't play with us as much because he had exams. And then the year after that, when we had exams, he was in the army, and then we were in the army, and then it just kind of drifted apart, and kind of, it's difficult to do practice, it's difficult to, and then life gets in the way. We recently met, the three of us, we met for the first time as a group in almost 10 years. We met either early this year or late last year, and it was very interesting to kind of catch up and hear from each other, and we still have that chemistry. It's one of those things where when you spend so much time together, working together, playing music together is a very intimate experience, I feel. It's like you have to be in sync with each other, you have to listen to each other, you're on the same beat. You form a connection with fellow musicians that even if you don't really talk to each other that much, or even if you don't share the same politics, right? You don't have the same circle of friends or whatever. When you're playing music together, it bonds you in a way that's very difficult to describe in any other terms. I guess the closest thing would probably be dancing with someone, right? There is that union there. Another thing that I remember thinking is quite similar is that my co-founder Desmond of my t-shirt company, we used to work on infographics. We used to work in the same company as well, and we used to work on infographics together, and we would have this back and forth where I come up with the text, he comes up with the visuals, I have some feedback about how to modify the visuals, and then we kind of have that back and forth. That was a lot like playing music. It's very intimate. It's very vulnerable. You have to because you're sharing something of yourself that's very intimate, right? It's your rhythms, it's your body, it's your vibe. It's you, right? And everybody has their own tone, their own rhythm, their own speed, their tempo, their intensity, volume, and you have to find a way to make it work. And there's something very profound about music, I would say. Probably, some music, like sports and the arts, right, are kind of the dominant spheres of where you learn about yourself and about each other and other people in very big ways, right? More so than taking tests on in school about you read a book and so like you have history class, and like if you're like history should be social, you know what I mean? You should be discussing it with other people. You should and there's a music to that, there's a arts to that. And you could say that there's some, anyway, I don't know. This is supposed to be about music. So playing in the band was great. We had I've written an entire draft of a novel called Make Some Noise. It's a fictional book about musicians in Singapore in the late 2000s trying to make it big. And there's layers to it. It's interesting because, when we started playing music, I was like a MySpace native, I would say. I was an internet native to begin with, right? And MySpace was the place to be, to discover bands, to upload recordings of your music. And we tried to record an EP, and we went to a studio and had a bunch of experiences. We weren't, knowing what I know now, if I could go back in time, I would be a lot more deliberate about my practice. I would have written a lot more songs. I would have spent more time on my instrument, practicing melodies. I didn't know how to practice, I guess. I didn't know how to write very well, and I wasn't as prolific as I now try to be in all aspects. And I do think that I might, maybe in a couple of years, or maybe now, I don't know, I'll figure it out, do like some singer-songwriter shit. I've just always kind of wanted to do it. I think it's a medium of expression that I enjoy. And there's something about a song that's different than talking into a camera or talking to an audience, where the persona element, the theatrical element is there, and it's a tool you can use to convey things, which I like. And I haven't yet started talking about, I guess, gigs and the scene, right? So I fell in love with the scene. The scene meant a lot to me, and the scene was, it's beautiful and terrible and kind and not cruel, and it's a microcosm of life itself, right? And I will get much more dramatic about it in my novel, but like when I'm talking about it, I guess I feel the urge to temper it in some sensible way. But man, I made a lot of friends. Some of those people I'm still in touch with, people who are musicians who, it's interesting to see where people turned out, how people turned out. There are a bunch of people that become like yoga instructors, wedding planners, MCs, photographers, right? Like it's just all these people coming together, for these events, right? And it's a social environment. It's people coming together to spend time together. It was my church in a sense, right? I was never religious, and I didn't have an institution, and I guess that's this whole other sphere of how like churches use music too, singing and hymns and all those things. But for secular people, I guess, of like, music is communion, right? It's a way of coming together. It's a way of celebrating each other, right? Even like metal bands, right? These really gruff guys with beards and smoking cigarettes, and they're wearing all black and spikes and shit. Like, they come together and they headbang and they mosh, which is like if you don't know what a mosh pit is, it's like where people consensually collide with each other in a playfully violent but not damaging way, right? And like they jostle around and push each other, and then on retrospect, it's just like I was inducted into that scene very naturally, and I participated in it. I have been in mosh pits, I have crowd surfed and stuff, but like explaining it to someone who has no idea about that scene, it's kind of alien, right? But I mean, I guess if you go to a sporting event, right, there's like all these like Mexican waves and like chants and all those things, right? It's the same thing, right? It's that communion. It's that the gathering of people to share feelings, share vibes. And yeah, you go to a music festival, it's all the same thing. It's people coming together, right? Right now, as I make this video, in the US, there are like protests, right? And a protest is not necessarily a riot. Like there are riots. It's like a spectrum. There are riots that are kind of violent and chaotic, and then there are protests where people are coming together and there's this lively energy about it. People are singing, people are smiling, laughing, waving signs. There are kids, grandmas. It's just this very human experience that isn't kind of top down, isn't state imposed, isn't scheduled in a structured way. It's this very organic outflowing of human being, right? And for me, music was that. In a place like Singapore, where there's a common assumption that everything is kind of manicured and sterile, and there is some truth to that. But there are, I think in one of my essays, in one of my memoirs, I said it's like flowers growing out of concrete, right? It's like there is life that wants to burst free, no matter where you are, no matter how strict a place is, right? And it's true for even in just many parts of the world, people are expressing themselves through music and dance and whatnot, and that has always been something very close and dear to my heart. And nowadays I find myself on Twitter hanging out with people who, like, there are a bunch of people who describe themselves as rationalists or post-rationalists, or a bunch of people say they're like, there's this culture, I guess, this kind of intellectual-ish culture, and there are these memes of like these big brain memes. Like, it shows like a guy whose brain is so big, like it's I guess it's a escalation thing, but like his brain is so big that it's a jail, it's around him and it's a jail, or his brain is so big that it's another person as well and it's fighting him, right? And I think music was my way out of that kind of overthinking problem, or like this being trapped in your own mind, right? I never went clubbing. I've always thought that, at least in Singapore, like I went like once or twice, and I never found it pleasant. It always felt the music was too loud, it was too dark, you can't see anyone, and everyone's just kind of gyrating anxiously. That's what I felt like it was. Like, maybe I'm projecting, but I felt like everyone was kind of anxiously gyrating at each other. It didn't seem fun at all. Maybe I wasn't drinking enough, I don't know. But like I felt like that I'm sure it's possible to have a good time in a club with good people that you enjoy dancing with and you feel like you can express yourself. But like the couple of times I went there, it felt like just way too much sexual tension and neediness, and people kind of just it might have been the people I hung out with, I don't know. And I don't want to put them down. It might have been me. Maybe I was like that. I was too self-conscious to enjoy myself in a club, maybe. But I've always found it possible to enjoy people making music and being around musicians and being in an audience of enjoying musicians. And some of my favorite experiences were not with me on stage, but like just me being in a crowd, in a small local crowd of people who enjoy their local bands. It felt very intimate. Some of my favorite songs are songs that only a couple of thousand people know, but couple of thousand people know, right? And I'll probably record them in the future to share them with more people, because that's what it's all about, man. It's about sharing, about coming together, about expression, about vibes, about creating a nourishing environment where people can be safe and people can express themselves and people can connect with each other. And I guess I haven't spoken much about the bad shit. There was some bad shit that I got upset about, and it was, again, because the scene is pretty small, and I think this is true for all small-ish scenes. of all kinds, locally, everywhere in the world, which is that, people get, there's like politics, and people start, like there's a gig, like some bands are playing a lot of shows, and is it because they are friends with the promoters, and like, are they not, some band, and we were accused of that sometimes. And in my case, I can say that it actually wasn't very true. We were kind of the outsiders who were just very, it's mostly me, I guess, but we were very adamant and very earnest about trying to talk to people and trying to make friends, even if they're not our friends. We'll be like, hi, we're so, we introduce ourselves. And you hear from people saying that, oh, there's no way, like, you would hear whispers, I guess, in the forums and whatnot, that some bands are, have relationships with promoters, or, and there were some, like, there's some promoters who've been around for a very, very long time who do it really for the passion of music, because they don't make a lot of money. And then there's some promoters who are like new, and then they try to exploit newer bands. So one of the things they would do is they would book a venue. They would get like 20 to 40 bands, or so, like a lot of bands to sign up, and they would charge the bands for the tickets. So they would say you need to sell at least 20 tickets of let's say $18 each, right? Let's imagine it's $20. That's like $400 per band, and then you have 20 bands, so that's $8,000, right? Let's say you book the venue for the night, costs about $5,000 or something like that. And yeah, so they have no interest in ensuring quality, and so they're kind of exploiting these new guys who'd have no experience playing music, no experience on stage, and those guys, guilt trip their friends, saying, "I'm playing at this venue, please come and support us." And friends feel, "Oh, my hair looks cool." Friends feel the urge to support their friends, right? And at least once or twice, and yeah, that used to happen, and I used to feel that was polluting the scene in a way. It's polluting the commons, right? You to make some money, you're making a whole bunch of people have a bad experience, which is, it's partially their fault, but they don't know better. You should know better, but you're encouraging people to create a bad experience for a couple of hundred people, and then those people will tell their friends, well, Singapore music's kind of shitty, right? Because that was their experience. And I was very passionate about trying to counterbalance that and trying to fix that. And the cool thing about, and this is like 2005, 2006, 2007, YouTube wasn't really as big a deal yet, and making videos was harder then. But now anybody can record a pretty high quality video of themselves singing and playing music on their phones, on their computers, and they can upload it to YouTube, so you can know in advance which bands are worth your time, right? You can like a band online before you go and watch them live, and that's a really great step up for the whole thing. But yeah, did I finish talking about scene politics? Again, it's challenging to talk about because I never want to make anyone look bad. I never want to sound like I'm insulting anybody. I had my share of drama as a teenager and in my early 20s of saying these people are bad, these people are wrong, and in the long run, over 10, 20 years, you realize none of that shit really matters, because most people don't have the energy and the persistence to stick around for the long haul, for the really long haul, right? There are some bands, I think Plain Sunset is an example of a Singaporean band that has been around probably like 20, 30 years maybe. 20 years? I'm not sure how long, but like I don't know when they last played, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do more reunion shows in the future. And it's kind of like the Avengers, like they come back together when they are needed, right? And or something like that. And then these new bands today that are doing really well, much more music. So like during my era, right, like people weren't so image conscious, I guess, which was partially to their detriment, but also partially kind of endearing. Whereas these days, I think the current batch of 2020 musicians, they know that image matters. They know that you have to have good photos, and you have to have an aesthetic, and you have to look good. Like, I mean, you don't have to. You can make good music without it, and you can build a brand without it. But even then, you have to be aware of the brand that you're building, right? So like, there's that awareness, which is it's nice to see. But I haven't been directly involved in the music scene in a while, and but it'll always be a part of me, right? And I'm very happy to have that legacy. I'm very proud of having once played in a band. I think I will probably play in bands again. I will always have a soft spot for anybody I see lugging a guitar or a bass around, or setting up, doing a sound check somewhere. And whenever I travel anywhere, even within Singapore or beyond, I'm always, I love going to live music venues. And right now, somewhere in the world, somebody is playing in a bar. It's bar o'clock somewhere right now, right? And somebody is playing, Sweet Child of Mine or Paradise City. There's Smoke on the Water, right? It's being played right now for sure. And I remember I just feel an affinity with those people. Brazilians love live music. They love Iron Maiden. They love Paramore. They have good taste in music. And I've never been to Brazil. I have a couple of friends in Brazil, but I feel this deep familial bond with Brazilians. I think there's this Singaporean band, Sherlyn Tan and the Unexpected. And so Sherlyn and her friends, they made a video covering some song really well, and they're like Brazilians in the comments saying this is one of the best covers of this song. And I love that. I appreciate that. And I would like to someday come to Brazil, right? And it's all because of music. And so I love music for that. I will never be kind of a prodigious kind of musical virtuoso. I'm fine with that. But I will always love music. It will always be a part of me, and it informs my thinking. It informs my approach to life. It informs the way I see the world and the way I do things. And I look forward to jamming with y'all. Right? Done.